The storm rolled over Manhattan like a warning from heaven, heavy clouds swallowing the skyline as the ambulance tore through traffic. Inside, 30-year-old Emily Carter clutched her swollen belly, breath shallow, sweat running down her temples. She was carrying triplets, and every contraction felt like her body was splitting apart. Yet what hurt her most wasn't the pain, it was the empty seat beside her. Daniel, her husband, wasn't there. He had stopped answering her calls an hour ago, right after texting that he was in a meeting on Wall Street and couldn't be disturbed. Emily held on to hope anyway, whispering that he would show up at the hospital the moment he saw all her missed calls. She was wrong. When the ambulance doors burst open at the ER entrance, bright lights cut across her vision. Nurses rushed her down the corridor toward surgery. Machines beeped, hands pressed on her arms, her belly, her chest. Voices blended together, commands overlapping, blood pressure dropping. "Get Dr. Lee now. She's seizing move." Emily tried to speak, but her voice broke into gasps. She thought of the little ones inside her. She had promised she would fight for them, no matter what. Just before the anesthesia swallowed her consciousness, she felt a faint touch on her fingers. She blinked through the fog, hoping it was Daniel. But it was only a nurse adjusting her IV line. Her heart cracked a little, and a single tear slid down her cheek. Across the city, Daniel Carter sat comfortably in the marble lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, staring into the eyes of a younger woman wearing a silk dress. Chloe leaned closer, whispering how glad she was that he finally chose happiness. Daniel slipped his iPhone into his pocket, ignoring the vibrating screen filled with frantic alerts. In his mind, nothing could interrupt this night. He had waited too long to taste this freedom, a freedom he believed he deserved. Back at the hospital, chaos erupted in the operating room. Emily's blood pressure crashed. Her pulse stuttered. A nurse called for the crash cart while Dr. D's, Marcus Lee, pressed 2 fingers against Emily's neck, searching for a stronger rhythm. For a moment that felt like eternity, the room froze. Then the alarm screamed. "Starting CPR. Push 1 of epinephrine. We're losing her." Emily drifted in and out of darkness, feeling the world slipping away. She thought she heard the cries of her babies, but maybe it was just wishful thinking. She wanted Daniel to hold her hand, tell her they were in this together. But the cold air around her reminded her she was truly alone. At the Ritz-Carlton, Daniel clinked glasses with Chloe. The golden city lights shimmered behind them, reflecting off polished floors and expensive champagne. He didn't care that while he toasted to a new life, his wife was fighting for her last breath. Back in the O, Emily's heartbeat weakened, then faded, then vanished. The monitor flatlined. The surgical team stared at the screen, horrified. They shocked her again, and again, and again. Finally, the line twitched. A weak rhythm returned, barely there but real. Emily's body had chosen to fight when no one else fought for her, yet destiny had already begun to shift. In a quiet corner of the hospital, a camera continued recording everything, the signatures, the hurried whispers, the cold decisions. Those silent images would soon rise like ghosts, demanding answers no one could escape from the truth they tried denying. And across town, as Daniel leaned in to kiss Chloe, he whispered a sentence that would later destroy him. "It's finally over." 2 years before the stormy night in Manhattan, Emily Carter believed she had married the safest man in the world. Back then, Daniel smiled often, carried her grocery bags up their small Queens apartment stairs, and kissed her forehead every morning before he rushed to his financial analyst job. Emily trusted him with the kind of wholehearted innocence people only have once in life. She worked long shifts at the hospital, proud to help others, and Daniel always said he admired her dedication. On weekends, they walked through Central Park, holding hands, sharing cheap ice cream, dreaming about a family and a small yard someday. Their dreams were simple then, untouched by pressure, money, or the shadows that come from wanting more than life ever promised. But things shifted when Daniel's company transferred him to a glass office tower overlooking Park Avenue. Suddenly he attended dinners filled with polished shoes, expensive watches, and people who measured worth by what they carried, not who they were. Emily noticed the change slowly, the way a season shifts without warning until one day the air feels unfamiliar. Daniel became distracted, always checking his phone, always promising he was just overwhelmed with deadlines and client demands. Emily tried to understand, reminding herself that ambition wasn't a sin, but loneliness crept in quietly. She waited for the evenings when he came home early enough to share dinner, even if it was just reheated pasta from the night before. Slowly, Daniel stopped talking about their future backyard and began talking about promotions, bonuses, and how everyone he knew seemed to be upgrading their lives. Emily sensed something fragile breaking, but she kept believing that marriage meant standing together through every season, even the silent ones. When she discovered she was pregnant, joy returned like sunlight after winter, warming every corner of her heart. She planned a small dinner, bought a simple cake, and waited for Daniel to come home so she could share the news that would change everything. But Daniel arrived late, smelling faintly of perfume she didn't own. His tie loosened, his eyes distant. He congratulated her, but the warmth was gone, replaced by a restrained smile that made her stomach twist. As her pregnancy advanced, his affection slipped away one gesture at a time, like sand falling through open fingers. Yet Emily kept believing that once the babies arrived, Daniel would return to the man he used to be, gentle and steady. She told herself that stress could twist anyone temporarily, and she prayed that love would ground them again. But the distance widened, and Daniel grew more secretive, spending nights claiming to work late while Emily felt the babies kick under her ribs. She waited by the window some evenings, sipping lukewarm tea, wondering when their marriage had become so quiet, so cold, so full of unspoken questions. Emily tried to reach him with gentle conversations, but Daniel brushed her concerns away, insisting everything was fine and she was just overwhelmed by hormones. Still, the unease grew heavier, especially when she noticed unfamiliar charges on their credit card statements, elegant restaurants she had never visited. She wanted to believe Daniel's explanations, but each excuse felt thinner than the last, and her heart trembled with fears she tried to ignore. Then came the night he didn't come home at all, and Emily sat alone at their small kitchen table, hands resting on her belly, hoping for a truth that wouldn't break her spirit. That night marked the first crack in her hope, the moment she realized love might not be enough anymore now. The hospital where Emily worked, and later where she fought for her life, stood tall in the heart of Manhattan, its glass windows reflecting the city's relentless rhythm. On good days, Emily loved the view from the staff lounge, the skyline glowing gold at sunset, taxis streaming below like yellow threads weaving through the streets. But as her pregnancy advanced, that same skyline felt more like a distant world she no longer belonged to. She moved slower, breathed heavier, and spent most breaks sitting with her hands on her belly, whispering calming words to her babies while the city hummed beyond the glass. She and Daniel lived in a modest apartment in Queens, far from the polished towers Daniel longed for. Their building smelled faintly of old carpet and fried food from the restaurant downstairs, but Emily never minded. She kept the place warm with framed photos, soft blankets, and the gentle hum of a second-hand air purifier she bought when she learned she was expecting. To her, home wasn't about luxury, it was about feeling safe. But Daniel had outgrown Queens long before he admitted it. His new office on Park Avenue had made him restless. He loved the sleek marble floors, the quiet elevators, the meetings in conference rooms overlooking the city. Emily remembered visiting him once, bringing lunch during her second trimester. She walked into the lobby, holding a paper bag of homemade sandwiches, wearing scrubs and comfortable shoes. Daniel looked nervous, glancing around as though someone might judge him for having a pregnant wife who didn't match the polished world he wanted to belong to. That moment stung more than she expected. Back in Queens, their evenings felt split between two worlds. Emily would chop vegetables for dinner, humming softly, while Daniel sat on the couch scrolling through listings of luxury apartments with river views. Emily tried to show interest, but every glowing advertisement of rooftop terraces and concierge services made her feel smaller. She didn't need that life. She just needed a husband who loved her the way he once did. As her due date approached, the hospital became her second home again. The bright hallways, the steady beeping of machines, the scent of antiseptic, none of it frightened her. She had worked there for years, comforting patients, holding their hands during scary moments. She believed she would be safe there when the time came. Linda, the experienced head nurse, made sure Emily always had an extra pillow, a warm blanket, and someone to talk to when Daniel was working late again. The hospital staff adored her, but behind their gentle smiles, many whispered concerns. Emily's pregnancy with triplets was high risk, and her swelling, headaches, and dizzy spells were red flags. Linda urged her repeatedly to stay overnight for monitoring, but Emily hated being alone in a hospital bed while Daniel barely texted back. On the nights she did stay for observation, she stared at the Manhattan skyline outside her window. Lights flickered in thousands of apartments, families eating dinner, couples laughing, people living lives full of warmth she desperately longed to return to. She wondered if Daniel ever looked at the same skyline from wherever he was, if he even thought of her at all. Meanwhile, in another part of Manhattan, the world Daniel chose kept pulling him farther away. Sleek lobbies, dim lounges, whispered conversations over expensive cocktails, these places made him feel important. They made him feel alive. And somewhere along the way, Daniel began to see Emily not as his partner but as an anchor weighing him down. One snowy evening, as Emily rode a cab home from the hospital, she looked out at the glowing city stretching endlessly beneath the falling flakes. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "Mommy will keep you safe." But even then, beneath her brave words, a quiet ache bloomed, an ache born from the growing suspicion that she might be fighting for this family alone. Yet she had no idea how true that fear would become, or how her world was about to shatter in ways she never imagined, and how the same Manhattan lights would later witness the truth Daniel tried so desperately to hide. Daniel Carter had once been the kind of man people trusted instantly, clean-cut, soft-spoken, attentive. But success didn't change him slowly. It changed him sharply, like a sudden crack down the center of who he used to be. The moment he earned his place at the Park Avenue office, something in him shifted. Ambition didn't just motivate him anymore, it consumed him. He started measuring life in numbers, in status, in the glittering reflections of wealth he wasn't close to but deeply craved. And the more dreams he chased, the less room he left for the woman who once stood beside him. Emily didn't see the transformation at first. She only saw the fatigue, the late nights, the growing distance. But others noticed the sharper edges immediately. His co-workers joked that Daniel had a Wall Street personality shift, the kind where a man starts believing he deserves more money, more admiration, more excitement than the life he built. And that was exactly when Chloe entered the picture. Chloe Miller worked in a marketing firm on Fifth Avenue, a place that catered to clients who sipped designer coffee and carried leather portfolios worth more than Emily's monthly paycheck. She was young, sharp, and ambitious in her own fragile way. She didn't grow up with privilege, but she wanted it desperately, collecting luxury like some people collect dreams. When she first met Daniel during a corporate collaboration meeting, she saw him as polished, confident, successful. She didn't see the cracks. She didn't see the lies. At first, Daniel acted like he wasn't interested. He mentioned he was married, but his tone made it sound like a footnote, not a foundation. And the more Chloe flirted, the more he let her. Soon he was staying late for work, answering her calls instead of Emily's, meeting her in dim lounges where no one asked questions and everyone lied with a smile. Emily would call, her voice soft with concern, asking when he'd come home. Daniel would glance at his buzzing phone, silence it, and lean closer to Chloe, whispering promises he never gave his wife. What made Daniel dangerous wasn't just his betrayal, it was the coldness behind it. He didn't see Emily as his partner anymore. He saw her as an obstacle, a weight, a burden, especially when she became pregnant with triplets. Instead of love, he felt pressure. Instead of pride, he felt fear. To Daniel, fatherhood wasn't joy, it was a prison cell. And whenever Emily mentioned baby names, tiny shoes, or future plans, he felt the walls close in tighter. Chloe didn't know she was falling for a man who was unraveling. She believed the story Daniel fed her that Emily was emotionally distant, that their marriage had been dying for years, that he stayed only out of guilt. When Chloe learned Emily was pregnant, shock registered in her eyes, but Daniel quickly turned it into pity. He called the pregnancy a complicated mistake, something he didn't know how to escape. Chloe didn't push further. She didn't want to lose her place in Daniel's shiny new world. The deeper Daniel fell into the affair, the more ruthless he became at home. He ignored Emily's swollen ankles, her headaches, her fear of complications. He accused her of being dramatic when she nearly fainted one evening. He refused to attend prenatal appointments, claiming he had meetings too important to miss. To him, Emily's suffering didn't matter. Only his future, his illusion of luxury did. And while Emily still clung to the hope that motherhood might bring them closer again, Daniel was already slipping away, emotionally gone long before he physically walked out of the hospital that night. His betrayal wasn't sudden. It was built quietly, lie by lie, while Emily slept beside him, believing she was loved. He had no idea that the choices he made in shadows would soon be dragged into the light, and that the truth he tried to bury would become the very thing that destroyed him. The months leading up to Emily's due date felt like walking a tightrope stretched between hope and dread. Her doctors warned her that carrying triplets came with serious risks, and each week her body felt heavier, her breathing more shallow, her legs more swollen. Yet she kept working, kept showing up, kept smiling through exhaustion because she believed her babies deserved a mother who fought for them. What she didn't know was that while she prayed for her family's future, Daniel was quietly preparing to abandon it. It started with small signs, missed phone calls, canceled plans, a sudden coldness that seeped into every corner of their home. Emily tried to shake it off, telling herself pregnancy made emotions sharper, but deep down, she sensed something shifting. Some nights, she sat alone on the couch, rubbing her belly while waiting for Daniel to come home. Sometimes he arrived after midnight. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. Then came the night everything cracked open. Emily had spent the entire day feeling lightheaded. Her vision blurred each time she stood up, and a throbbing headache dug its way through her skull. Linda, the head nurse, noticed the way Emily kept steadying herself against the walls at work and insisted she go straight to the maternity wing for monitoring. Emily resisted at first, embarrassed to cause trouble, but by late afternoon, she felt her knees buckle and her heart race. The staff rushed her into a wheelchair, and she finally agreed to be admitted for the night. "Call Daniel," Linda urged gently. "He should be here." Emily nodded, dialing him with trembling fingers. The call rang and rang, then went to voicemail. She tried again, no answer. She sent a text, then another. Still nothing. She swallowed the hurt spreading in her chest, trying to stay calm for the babies. She told herself he was busy, that he'd walk through the door any minute with that distracted smile he always wore lately. But while Emily waited in a hospital bed beneath harsh fluorescent lights, Daniel was slipping into a private dining room at a rooftop restaurant, the kind with dim candles and sweeping views of the Manhattan skyline. Chloe sat across from him in a red dress, laughing softly as Daniel touched her hand. To him, this dinner felt like escape. To Emily, his absence felt like betrayal. By midnight, her headache grew unbearable. Her blood pressure skyrocketed. She tried calling Daniel again, her voice thin and shaking. When he still didn't respond, fear wrapped around her ribs like a tightening band. Nurses rushed in as alarms started beeping. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Her vision dimmed, her hands went numb. And just before she lost consciousness, she whispered, "Please, call my husband." But Daniel didn't see the message until hours later, when he stepped out of the restaurant and reached into his pocket. His screen overflowed with missed calls and alerts. For a moment, Chloe saw panic flicker across his face. "Should you go to her?" she asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, a long, terrible hesitation that revealed more truth than he meant to show. "She's always overreacting," he muttered. "It's probably nothing." He didn't want to ruin the evening. He didn't want to face responsibility. He didn't want to return to the life he was already halfway out of. But back at the hospital, Emily lay unconscious, surrounded by frantic staff. Her babies were in danger. She was in danger. Doctors called for an emergency C-section. Linda called Daniel again. He didn't pick up. And as the operating room prepared for a life-or-death battle, the cameras above the hallway blinked alive, recording every moment, every decision, every absence that would later unravel the truth behind Daniel's betrayal. Because what happened that night would be remembered not just as a medical emergency, but as the moment the world learned what kind of man Daniel truly was and how far he was willing to go to protect his lies. The operating room felt colder than any place Emily had ever been. Even in her foggy state, drifting between consciousness and nothingness, she sensed the urgency. Voices overlapped, gloves snapped, machines hummed with rising panic. Her body trembled on the table, though she couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even open her eyes. Somewhere deep inside, she felt her babies struggling with her. She tried to reach for them, but the darkness kept swallowing her whole. "Blood pressure's crashing," someone shouted. "Prep for emergency C-section now." Linda leaned close to Emily's ear, whispering, "Stay with us, sweetheart. Stay with your babies." Her voice cracked, though she tried to hide it. She had seen emergencies before, but this one felt different. This one felt personal. Meanwhile, Daniel was stepping into the glass elevator of a luxury hotel, adjusting his collar, unaware or pretending to be unaware of the life hanging by a thread across the city. Chloe kissed his cheek lightly, telling him good night, promising to call him in the morning. Daniel smiled, a hollow smile, as if nothing in the world demanded his presence elsewhere. He didn't check his phone. He didn't wonder if Emily was safe. The thought barely crossed his mind. Back in the OR, the incision was made. A nurse held up the first baby, tiny, wet, fragile, but breathing. The second followed moments later, a little weaker but still fighting. The third frightened everyone. His cry didn't come right away, and his chest barely moved. Doctors surrounded him with tense urgency, delivering breaths, rubbing his tiny feet until a faint wail finally broke through. The room let out a collective exhale, but Emily wasn't waking up. Her heart rate dipped, climbed, dipped again. A doctor called for more medication. Dr. Marcus Lee gritted his teeth, focusing on every beat, every flicker on the monitor. Minutes stretched like hours. When the final stitch was made, Emily didn't stir. Her eyelids didn't flutter. Her breathing remained shallow and dependent on machines. "Put her on full support," Dr. Lee ordered. "She's not gone, we fight." And they did. For hours. Outside the OR, the hallway was silent except for the faint echo of footsteps. A security camera blinked its red light, recording the empty space Daniel should have been standing in. At 3:12 a.m., a nurse tried calling him again, straight to voicemail. When Emily was finally transferred to ICU, lying still beneath wires and blinking lights, Linda stood beside her bed with tears in her eyes. She brushed a hand over Emily's cold fingers. "You did it," she whispered. "Your babies are here. Now you come back too." But Emily didn't move. Her mind drifted in a gray, weightless place where time didn't exist. She saw flashes, tiny hands, soft cries, a glowing skyline, Daniel turning away, Chloe's silhouette. Every image stabbed at her, blurring into pain she couldn't escape. She felt like she was sinking deeper and deeper into a sea without light. Back in Queens, Sarah, Emily's sister, sat awake, staring at her silent phone. She didn't know yet. No one had thought to call her. She paced her living room, feeling a strange unease she couldn't explain. The night felt heavy, wrong. She hugged herself tightly, whispering into the dark, "Emily, please be okay." At dawn, Daniel finally checked his phone. Dozens of missed calls, dozens of texts. His expression tightened, but not from fear, more from inconvenience. He sank onto the hotel bed, exhaling sharply. Chloe slept curled beside him, unaware. He did not rush to the hospital. He did not ask if Emily survived the surgery. Instead, he whispered to himself, "It's too late now." But in the ICU, under cold morning light, Emily's finger twitched. It was small, almost invisible, but it was the first sign that she was not gone, the first sign that she still had something left to fight for and something left to return for. Morning sunlight barely touched the ICU windows when the team gathered around Emily's bed. Machines beeped in slow, uncertain rhythms, each sound echoing the fragility of her life. Her face looked peaceful, almost sleeping, but the stillness terrified the doctors. They performed test after test, searching for signs of neurological response. A tap on the pupil, a pinch to the arm, a firm call of her name. Emily did not react. Dr. Patel, the neurologist, exhaled heavily, his expression grim. He asked the nurses to dim the lights and prepare the official checklist for possible brain death evaluation. No one wanted to believe this was happening, especially not after the fight she had endured through the night. Linda stood by the doorway, arms folded tightly, as if holding herself together. She had watched Emily grow weaker for months, and now she watched a group of specialists circle her bed like mourners around a fading candle. The hospital felt too quiet, too cold. Linda whispered, "She's stronger than this." But even she feared the words might be wishful thinking. Across town, Daniel finally stepped out of the luxury hotel lobby, looking tired but not distraught. He checked his messages again, scrolling through the alerts with a frown. Chloe approached him, touching his arm. "Are you going to see her?" Daniel hesitated. Then he said, "I'll go, but there's nothing I can do." When Daniel arrived at the hospital, the staff expected panic, shock, grief, anything human. Instead, he walked calmly, greeting the receptionist as though he were checking into a routine appointment. He asked which room his wife was in, then stepped into the ICU with a practiced sadness on his face. Linda watched him closely. Something about him felt off, too controlled, too smooth. Inside the room, Dr. Patel explained the test results. "We need to perform the apnea test, then repeat the neurological assessment. If there is no response, we may have to declare brain death." Daniel nodded, as if he had been waiting for those words. "Do whatever you need to do," he said softly, but without breaking. Linda's stomach twisted. When the apnea test was completed, Emily's chest did not rise on its own. Her brain showed no reaction to stimuli. The room filled with a heavy silence. Dr. Patel looked at Daniel. "We'll perform one more evaluation, but the results are not encouraging." Daniel lowered his gaze, sighing with carefully measured grief. If she can't recover, then maybe it's time to let her go." His tone made Linda shiver. She stepped forward. "With all due respect, she is young and just went through major surgery. Maybe we should give her more time." Daniel's eyes hardened for a moment before he forced a gentle expression. "I appreciate your compassion, but I know my wife." But he didn't. Not anymore. As the final tests moved forward, a small security camera blinked quietly above the doorway. It recorded Daniel reaching into his bag, sliding out a folded document, and handing it to Dr. Patel. The doctor frowned, examining the signature. Daniel whispered something too low for the microphone, but his posture was tense, persuasive, urging action. Emily, still trapped in darkness, felt a faint ripple somewhere inside her mind, like a distant voice calling her back. A spark she couldn't reach yet. A promise she wasn't ready to break. And as the specialists prepared the final declaration, Daniel whispered the words, "No husband should ever say, 'It's better this way.'" But the truth was about to unravel because someone else had heard him. The moment Daniel stepped out of the ICU, he didn't linger in the hallway or look back through the glass at the woman who had loved him without conditions. Instead, he walked briskly toward the hospital lobby, his face tight with impatience rather than grief. He didn't ask about the babies. He didn't ask if Emily's condition might change. His only question was, "Is the paperwork ready?" The nurse at the desk blinked in confusion before answering politely. Daniel nodded as though he were wrapping up a business transaction, not a wife's life. Outside, the morning cold slapped him across the face, but it didn't slow him. He exhaled sharply, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored coat before pulling out his phone. He scrolled past the missed calls again, then tapped on Chloe's name. When she answered, her voice was sleepy, warm, hopeful. "Is everything okay?" Daniel glanced back at the building for a moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It's done." Chloe didn't know exactly what "done" meant, but she didn't ask. She assumed Emily was stable, maybe unconscious, maybe recovering. She didn't imagine Daniel walking away from a deathbed he practically signed off on. All she heard was Daniel's familiar confidence, the tone he used whenever he closed a deal. She told him she had checked them into a suite at the Ritz-Carlton, overlooking the skyline he always dreamed of. Daniel straightened his shoulders. "I'm on my way," he said, like a man stepping into a future he believed he deserved. Back in the ICU, Linda watched him leave through the glass doors. Something inside her, a nurse's intuition, a woman's instinct told her his grief was a performance. She turned back toward Emily, who lay still beneath the steady rhythm of machines. Linda placed a warm hand on her arm. "You're not gone," she whispered. "Not yet. I can feel it." And she could. A faint warmth, a flicker of life, the tiniest spark. Meanwhile, Daniel arrived at the hotel, stepping into the marble lobby like he belonged there. Chandler, the receptionist, greeted him warmly, assuming he was another high-income guest in a tailored coat. Daniel smiled faintly as he rode the elevator up to the suite. When the doors opened, Chloe rushed toward him. "I was so worried," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. Daniel kissed her lightly, the way a man kisses the woman he believes is his new beginning. Inside the suite, soft jazz played in the background. The view of Manhattan stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, gold, steel, and movement. Daniel walked toward the glass, taking in the skyline as though claiming it. Chloe poured champagne, handing him a glass. "To us," she said. He clinked his glass against hers without hesitation. But while Daniel sipped expensive champagne, the hospital staff gathered around the tiny incubators holding Emily's newborns. 3 fragile lives, fighting for breath. The babies whimpered softly, their little chests rising unevenly. A nurse whispered, "Your mama is strong. She'll come back for you." None of them noticed that the security camera across the hall had been quietly recording for hours, capturing every step Daniel took, every whispered conversation, every damning moment. Back in the suite, Chloe lay curled beside Daniel on the couch. "Do you think things will be easier now?" she asked gently. Daniel rested his arm behind her, staring at the skyline. "Yeah," he said. "Everything's finally falling into place." His words floated through the warm room, settling between the two of them like a promise built on lies. And miles away, as machines hummed steadily, Emily's finger twitched again. A tiny movement, a tiny rebellion, a tiny whisper from the edge of darkness, a sign that the story Daniel thought was over was only just beginning. The hospital's security room was always quiet at night, a dim space filled with screens showing hallways, elevators, and waiting rooms. On this particular morning, just after Daniel disappeared into the cold air outside, Officer Grant settled into his usual chair with a cup of lukewarm coffee. He didn't know Emily, didn't know her story, but he knew hospitals had secrets. Cameras, he believed, always told the truth people tried to hide. As he scanned the screens, one clip caught his attention. Daniel in the consultation room with Dr. Patel, leaning in too close, his expression controlled rather than devastated. Grant made a mental note of the timestamp. Linda, meanwhile, walked toward the staff lounge, exhausted and shaken. She passed the same hallway camera that had captured Daniel earlier. She didn't know yet that the footage would become the key to everything, but something in her heart felt unsettled. She replayed his calm face in her mind, that unnatural stillness when he was told his wife might be brain-dead. She whispered under her breath, "A man grieving doesn't look like that." Her doubts lingered as she checked on the newborns, watching their little chests rise and fall. She promised them softly that their mother would come back. Across the city, Daniel lounged in the hotel suite, pretending nothing was unraveling behind him. Chloe sat beside him on the bed, smoothing her hair while scrolling through her phone. "You should check on her," she murmured. Daniel's jaw tightened. "There's no point," he replied. He didn't realize his words were being recorded not by the hotel, but by the hospital cameras still saving each frame of his earlier decisions. He didn't know the footage he tried to ignore would come back with a vengeance. Officer Grant replayed the clip again. Something was wrong. Daniel handed Dr. Patel a document, and although the camera had no audio, Grant recognized the body language: insistence, pressure, urgency. The doctor looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the door as if worried someone might walk in. Grant zoomed the footage slightly, noting the stiff movement of the paper. That wasn't grief. That was negotiation. He flagged the clip for the morning supervisor before stepping away for fresh air. The image burned into his mind. In the ICU, Emily lay motionless, but her body was not silent. Faint tremors traveled down her fingers, fluttering like tiny sparks. A nurse noticed the movement and frowned, unsure if it was real or imagined. She leaned closer, whispering, "Emily, can you hear me?" But the tremor faded. Still, the moment left an imprint, a shadow of hope that refused to disappear. Linda, returning from the nursery, felt her breath catch when she saw the nurse staring at Emily's hand. "Something happened?" Linda asked. The nurse hesitated. "Maybe. I'm not sure." But it didn't look like nothing. Meanwhile, Grant returned inside, pulling up the hallway clip where Daniel stood alone just after the consultation. Daniel lifted his phone to his ear, pacing slowly, his mouth forming words Grant studied closely. He replayed the frame again and again, until the silent whisper became unmistakable. "It's done. She's not coming back." Grant froze. He leaned closer. He zoomed the image. The words were clear as daylight, even without sound. He felt a cold weight settle in his chest. This wasn't the behavior of a devastated husband. This was a man relieved. Grant printed the timestamp log and placed it in the secure file drawer for review. He didn't know Emily's name, but he knew someone needed to see this. Someone would, because the cameras had captured everything Daniel tried to bury, and his downfall had already begun. The world outside continued, moving cars rushing through Manhattan, people hurrying to work, seasons changing, but inside the rehabilitation ward where Emily was transferred, time felt frozen. The room was small, quiet, and far from the busy hospital where she had delivered her babies. Here, the lights were dimmer, the halls calmer. Machines hummed with steady, indifferent rhythm, keeping her alive while her mind drifted somewhere unreachable. For the first few weeks, no one knew whether she would ever wake again. Sarah, her older sister, finally received the call that shattered her morning coffee into trembling panic. She rushed to the facility, heart pounding, tears blurring the passing streets. When she reached Emily's room, her breath hitched. Seeing her sister strong, bright, always caring for others, now lying pale and motionless, felt like a punch she couldn't recover from. Sarah sank into the chair beside the bed and whispered, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She kept that promise. Every day after work, Sarah arrived with a Starbucks cup, Emily's favorite vanilla latte, even though Emily couldn't drink it. She brought books Emily loved, like Women Who Run with the Wolves and Atomic Habits, reading aloud even when her voice cracked. She retold childhood memories, described the baby's 3 tiny miracles still in the NICU, and played soft music from Emily's playlist. She hoped Emily could hear something, anything, that would anchor her spirit to this world. Meanwhile, Daniel rarely visited. He told the hospital he was overwhelmed caring for 3 newborns alone. He told Sarah he was grieving in his own way. He told Chloe it was too hard to see Emily like that. Each excuse was polished, believable, rehearsed. But the truth was darker. He didn't want to be there. He didn't want reminders of the wife he had already emotionally buried. His visits became less frequent until they stopped completely. Linda, on the other hand, refused to let Emily be forgotten. She visited once a week on her day off, bringing new blankets, gentle lotion for Emily's dry hands, and updates from the nurses who had helped deliver the babies. She told Sarah quietly about the strange behavior she'd witnessed the night of the surgery. She didn't accuse Daniel directly, not yet, but her eyes held a warning. "Something wasn't right," she whispered. "I felt it in my bones." Sarah took those words home with her, replaying them each night as worry tightened around her heart. As weeks turned into months, the babies grew stronger. Each milestone a steady breath, an open eye. A tiny cry was celebrated by the NICU staff, by Sarah, and by Linda. But none of those moments included Daniel. He visited the babies rarely, offering excuses or appearing distracted when he did. He never stayed long. And he never asked about Emily. Inside her quiet room, Emily drifted through layers of darkness. She wasn't dead, but her mind floated somewhere between memory and silence. She heard faint echoes, sometimes Sarah reading, Linda humming, the distant cry of a newborn she felt she should know. But these sounds felt like dreams she couldn't hold on to. Then one afternoon, As sunlight streamed softly through the blinds, something shifted. Sarah was reading aloud, her voice soothing and steady. When she paused to wipe her tears, "Please come back," she whispered. "Your babies need you. I need you." Emily's fingers twitched, barely a flutter, but real. Sarah gasped. She leaned forward, gripping Emily's hand. "Emily? Em, can you hear me?" The room fell silent. The tremor stopped, but hope had entered the room like a breath of fresh air. That tiny movement meant her spirit wasn't gone. It meant she was still fighting, still trying, and little by little, the darkness around her began to crack. The first sign of awakening came quietly, almost shyly, like a whisper rising from deep water. It was early morning when Emily's eyelashes fluttered a tiny movement, so faint the nurse nearly missed it. The nurse leaned closer, her breath catching. "Emily?" she whispered. No answer. But something had changed, something subtle but undeniable. She immediately called Sarah, who arrived within minutes, heart racing, hope and fear tangled in her chest. When Sarah entered the room, she dropped her purse and rushed to the bed. "Em?" Her voice trembled. She reached out, holding her sister's cool hand. "It's me. I'm here." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emily's fingers curled around hers. It wasn't full strength. It wasn't consistent. But it was real. Sarah sobbed, tears flowing freely as she pressed her forehead against Emily's hand. "Come back to me, Em. Please come back." Nurses gathered, whispering with cautious optimism. One hurried to get Dr. Lee, who rushed in with a mixture of disbelief and hope etched across his face. He ran a gentle set of neurological checks. "Emily," he said softly, "if you can hear me, try to move your fingers again." Silence. Machines hummed. Then another twitch. Stronger this time. Dr. Lee exhaled, smiling slightly. "She's trying." Over the next few days, progress came slowly but steadily. Emily's eyelids fluttered more often. Her fingers shifted. Her breathing synced more naturally with the ventilator. It was as if her body was remembering how to live again. The milestone came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Sarah sat by the bed, reading aloud from Women Who Run with the Wolves, a book Emily loved for its strength and resilience. The sun cast warm patterns across the blanket. Sarah turned the page, paused, then felt a strange pressure on her palm. She turned sharply. Emily's eyes were open, not fully but enough. Enough to reveal a dazed, confused, frightened awareness. Her gaze wandered the room, unfocused, trying to make sense of the world she had returned to. Sarah covered her mouth to hold back a cry. "Emily? Oh my God, Emily, you're here." Dr. Lee was called immediately. He approached the bed carefully, speaking softly. "Emily, you're safe. You've been asleep for a while, but you're safe." Her eyes flickered to him, then back to Sarah. Her lips trembled, dry and weak. She tried to speak, but only a whispery breath escaped. "It's okay," Sarah said, tears streaming. "Don't try too hard. I'm right here." Over the next hours, Emily remained awake, though disoriented. Memories came in thin fragments: her pregnancy, the ambulance lights, the chaos of surgery, a crushing loneliness she couldn't name. She blinked slowly and stared at Sarah, mouthing a single word. "Babies?" Sarah nodded, crying harder. "They're alive, Em. They're okay. 3 beautiful little fighters. They're waiting for you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. Her body trembled, overwhelmed by relief and terror all at once. She looked toward the door, as though expecting someone else to enter, the one person who should have been there the moment she opened her eyes. But Daniel never came. Not that day, not the next. He didn't send flowers, didn't call, didn't ask for updates. Emily noticed his absence, and the memory of coldness in the operating room crept back into her chest like a shadow. She tried to speak again, forcing out a broken whisper. "Where is he?" Sarah hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He's been busy," she said softly. but the truth sat heavy behind her eyes. Emily looked away, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Even in her fragile state, she sensed something was wrong deeply, painfully wrong. But recovery gave her strength. Strength gave her awareness. And awareness would soon give her questions. Questions Daniel would not be ready to answer. Because Emily hadn't just woken up, she had returned to finish a story that Daniel thought he'd already ended. When Emily grew stronger, able to move her head and whisper single-syllable sounds, the hospital staff decided it was time to notify Daniel formally of her recovery. They assumed he would rush in, overwhelmed with joy. Instead, he arrived late in the afternoon, wearing a crisp suit, polished shoes, and an air of impatience rather than concern. The moment he stepped into the room, Emily's weak smile froze. Something about him felt wrong. Colder, more distant. "Oh," Daniel said, as though he had stumbled upon an unplanned appointment. "You're awake." Awake. Not "thank God," not "I was terrified," not "I missed you." Just awake. Emily searched his face for something: fear, love, relief, but found nothing but discomfort. She whispered, voice breaking, "Where have you been?" Daniel took a seat, crossing his legs with rehearsed calm. "I've been taking care of the babies," he said lightly. "It's been overwhelming." That didn't feel right. Not the tone, not the words. Daniel had always hated diapers, chaos, sleepless nights. Now he spoke as though he were a heroic single father managing the unimaginable. Emily's brow furrowed, but her thoughts were too foggy, her body too weak to argue. He cleared his throat and leaned closer, his expression softening just enough to appear caring. "The doctors told me everything. They said you were gone, that there was no hope. I did what I thought was right." His voice trembled slightly, too slightly. "They made it seem like keeping you alive was cruel." Emily's breath hitched. She remembered cold voices in the OR. She remembered darkness swallowing her. But everything felt distant and muddled. "You signed?" she whispered. Daniel looked away, playing the part of the conflicted husband. "I didn't want to, but I couldn't let you suffer. I was told you wouldn't make it, that even if you woke up, you'd never be yourself." His words sank like stones in her chest. Emily blinked slowly, struggling to absorb it. "But I'm here." "Yes," he said quickly, "and that's what matters now. You made it. Let's not focus on the past." He forced a smile. "We should celebrate this miracle." But something about that smile felt hollow. His eyes darted toward the hallway, avoiding the weight of her gaze. Emily sensed the lie before she understood it. Her instincts prickled, but her mind, still foggy from months in darkness, couldn't piece together why. He reached for her hand, but she felt no warmth in touch, just a pressure meant to mimic affection. "I'll make sure you get the best care. I'll take care of everything." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. A reflexive flicker of panic flashed across his face. He snatched the device and turned away from her. "It's work," he muttered. But when he lifted the phone slightly, Emily saw the screen light up. Ritz-Carlton reservation confirmation. His stomach dropped. Daniel quickly locked the screen, pretending nothing had happened. "Anyway," he said, clearing his throat, "I'll come back tomorrow. Rest, okay?" He left before noticing the single tear sliding down her cheek. That evening, Linda visited. She sat beside Emily, gently adjusting her blanket. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. Emily hesitated. She couldn't speak the truth, yet it felt like a shadow she couldn't name. "Confused," she whispered. Linda nodded slowly. "I need you to know something," she murmured. "When you were in surgery, things weren't right." Emily's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Linda took her hand gently. "Not now, when you're stronger." But Emily saw fear, real fear in Linda's eyes. Later that night, alone in the dim room, Emily stared at the ceiling, memories flickering like broken light bulbs. She remembered a cold voice, a signature, a phone call, a sense of being abandoned in the moment she needed Daniel most. She turned her head toward the window, her throat tightening. Something was horribly, unforgivably wrong, and soon she would learn the truth nobody intended for her to find. Recovery strengthened Emily's body before it strengthened her mind. Each day she could move a little more, speak a little clearer, breathe a little deeper without the machine's help. But while her muscles healed, something inside her, something heavy, cold, and unsettling, kept growing. A sense that the world she'd woken up into wasn't the world she'd left behind. A sense that Daniel's visits weren't gestures of love, but rehearsed performances. A sense that the truth was hiding somewhere just out of reach. 3 days after Daniel's visit, Sarah arrived with pictures of the babies. "Look," she whispered, smiling through tears. "They're getting so big." Emily studied the photos, 3 tiny faces, each with her eyes, her nose, her strength. Joy filled her heart, but something else lingered in the background. A whisper of fear. "Has Daniel been visiting them?" Emily asked carefully. Sarah hesitated. Too long. Just a beat, but long enough to betray the truth she was trying to shield her from. "He comes sometimes," she answered vaguely. Emily's gaze sharpened. "Sometimes?" Sarah looked down at her hands. "They're being well cared for. That's what matters right now." Emily didn't push further, but the ache in her chest twisted. Daniel hadn't even asked to see the new photos. He hadn't once mentioned the babies during his visit. What kind of father avoids his newborn children? 2 days later, Emily received a surprise visitor, Linda. The head nurse looked tired, carrying a folder she didn't open. She sat gently beside the bed, her voice soft. "How are you feeling today?" Emily studied her carefully. "Linda," she whispered, "what really happened that night?" Linda froze. For a moment she seemed to debate whether to speak. Finally, she sighed, folding her hands in her lap. "There were inconsistencies," she said. "Things that didn't feel right." Emily's breath caught. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Linda shook her head. "I shouldn't say more until I'm certain. But I promise you something about Daniel's behavior that night. It wasn't normal." Emily closed her eyes, fighting the rising panic. "I remember voices," she whispered. "Cold. Rushed. Someone saying there was no point trying." Tears slid down her temples. "Was that him?" Linda didn't answer. She didn't have to. Later that week, Sarah returned with groceries for the nurses and fresh flowers for Emily's bedside. She was scrolling through her phone while Emily rested when suddenly she gasped softly. Look at this." She turned the screen toward her sister. There was Daniel, standing in a luxury apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a glittering Manhattan skyline behind him. He was dressed casually, glass of wine in hand. But it wasn't the apartment that made Emily's stomach twist, it was the reflection in the glass. A woman's silhouette. Chloe. A sharp, piercing chill ran down Emily's spine. "When was this posted?" Emily whispered. Sarah checked. Last week. Last week. When Emily was fighting for her life. When Daniel claimed he was overwhelmed caring for the babies. When he said he was grieving. Emily's throat tightened painfully. "He's lying," she whispered. "To everyone." Sarah reached for her hand. "Emily, I didn't want to tell you until you were stronger." Emily shook her head weakly. "No, I need to know. All of it." That afternoon, Linda returned again. This time, she didn't come empty-handed. She held a USB drive and a printed request form. "There's a security officer who believes you deserve answers," she said quietly. "He saved footage from the night of your surgery." Emily's heart stopped. "What footage?" Linda's voice trembled. "Footage of Daniel. What he said. What he handed the doctor. What he did after they declared you unresponsive." Emily's breathing quickened. "Show me." Linda hesitated. "It might hurt you." "Show me," Emily repeated, stronger this time, because the fear she carried inside her was no longer just fear. It was certainty. Daniel hadn't just failed her. He had abandoned her. And soon the camera would prove it. The next morning, Emily sat upright for the first time without assistance. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were clear, sharper than they had been since waking. The room felt colder, heavier, as though the truth itself was waiting at the door. Sarah stood beside her, arms crossed tightly, while Linda paced the corner, anxious but determined. Dr. Marcus Lee soon joined them, carrying a stack of medical files under his arm, his expression serious. "Emily," he began gently, "before we show you anything, I need you to understand that what happened the night you delivered, it wasn't standard procedure. And some decisions weren't made with full transparency." Emily's heart hammered painfully. "Just tell me," she breathed. "All of it." Linda exchanged a glance with Dr. Lee, then handed Emily the printed request form. "We're trying to retrieve the entire chain of documentation from that night," she explained. "Surgical notes, consultation forms, the brain, death worksheet, and the DNR decision Daniel signed." Emily froze. "I never signed a DNR," she whispered. "I know," Linda said softly. "Which is why we need to examine the documents." Sarah stepped closer. "The hospital legal department is being careful. They don't want to admit fault unless the evidence is undeniable." "So we make it undeniable," Emily said, surprising everyone with her strength. Dr. Lee nodded. "There's more. The security officer Grant flagged footage he found suspicious. Our request to access the archived cameras was approved, but only under supervision. We're going to view them today." Emily felt the room tilt slightly, but she steadied herself. She'd been drowning in the dark long enough. It was time to swim toward the light, no matter how painful. They wheeled her into the administrative wing, where frosted glass doors and polished floors made the space feel colder than the ICU. Officer Grant greeted them, a broad man with kind eyes and a nervous posture. He pointed to a monitor. "Everything you're about to see is time-stamped from the night of the surgery." The first video played. Daniel pacing a hallway near the surgical wing, phone pressed to his ear. His expression wasn't grief, it was annoyance. He hung up abruptly, muttering something under his breath. Emily leaned forward, eyes burning. The second video. Daniel in a small consultation room with Dr. Patel. He slid a folded document across the table, tapping it firmly, as though making a point. "Doctor." Patel hesitated, rubbing his forehead before reluctantly opening the paper. Emily's stomach twisted. "What is that?" she whispered. Grant zoomed in slightly. "Looks like an advance directive, or DNR. But I didn't sign one," Emily said again, voice shaking. Sarah squeezed her hand tightly. "We'll prove that." The third video froze everyone. Daniel standing outside the ICU, staring at Emily through the glass. His face was blank, jaw tight. Then, slowly, a smirk, small but unmistakable, crossed his face. He lifted his phone and whispered, "It's done." "She's not coming back." Emily clamped a hand over her mouth. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. Linda's eyes burned with fury. Dr. Lee stepped forward, fists clenched. Sarah trembled with rage. Grant swallowed hard. "We have one more." The final video showed Daniel leaving the hospital at 3:41 a.m. He wasn't crying. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't devastated. He was relieved. He walked briskly, pulling out his phone, and the timestamp caught his whispered words as he stepped through the sliding doors into the freezing night. Finally free. Emily felt something inside her crack, not a break that destroyed, but one that awakened. She wiped her tears. Her voice, though weak, carried a strength no one had heard from her before. "He left me to die," she whispered. "He wanted me gone." Sarah leaned close. "Then we make him answer for it." Linda nodded through tears. "And we don't stop until the whole world knows the truth." Dr. Lee set his jaw. This was criminal. Emily straightened, her eyes burning with a new fire. She wasn't just waking up anymore. She was rising to expose the man who betrayed her and take back the life he tried to erase. The conference room where they gathered to review the full security archive felt nothing like a hospital space. It looked more like a boardroom, long polished table, leather chairs, cold fluorescent lights humming above. Emily was wheeled in slowly by Sarah, her blanket tucked around her legs, her posture straighter than it had been in months. Strength radiated from her now, not the physical kind, but the kind built from truth, clawing its way to the surface. Officer Grant connected the last drive to the monitor. "These clips weren't part of the regular review," he explained. "They were stored automatically in the long-term server. Most people forget that camera records go deeper than the 48-hour schedule." Daniel was counting on that forgotten detail. Linda sat at Emily's left, Dr. Lee at her right. The tension was thick enough to choke on. "Whenever you're ready," Grant said, hitting play. The first clip had sound, a rare stroke of luck. One of the cameras near the consultation room had a faulty microphone that recorded faint audio. The speakers crackled, then stabilized, revealing Daniel's voice, sharp, impatient. "No," he hissed at Dr. Patel. "You told me her chances were near zero. Don't change the story now." Dr. Patel shook his head in the footage, visibly uncomfortable. "I said her condition was critical. I never said she couldn't recover." Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. Emily's hands clenched on her blanket. She could feel her pulse in her throat, hot tears burning her eyes. Sarah covered her mouth to stifle a cry. Grant paused the video. "There's more." The next clip showed Daniel pulling out the fake advance directive again. This time, the camera angle caught the signature clearly. Grant zoomed in. Emily didn't need a handwriting analyst to confirm what she already knew. "That's not my signature," she whispered, voice cracking. Linda squeezed her hand gently. "We know, sweetheart." Dr. Lee stood abruptly, pacing the room, fists clenched. "This is fraud. This is intentional misrepresentation. This is beyond unethical, it's criminal." Emily stared at the monitor, heart pounding. "He wanted them to stop fighting for me," she whispered through tears. "He wanted me gone." The next clip played, and this one hurt the most. Daniel stood outside the ICU at 3:12 a.m. His face in the footage was colder than any version of him Emily had ever known. He stared at her unconscious body, then lifted his phone. "It's done." His voice whispered through the speakers. "She's not coming back. We're free now. We. Not I. We." The words sliced through Emily like a blade. Chloe. The Mistress. The woman who knew only the story Daniel fed her. Dr. Lee lowered his head, no longer able to hide his fury. "He lied to all of us," he said. "Manipulated medical staff. Pressured decisions. Falsified documents." His voice shook. "He nearly killed you." The next clip showed Daniel leaving the hospital with confidence in his stride. Not grief, not pain. Confidence. As though he had won something. When the screen finally went dark, no one spoke. Not for several seconds. Then Emily lifted her chin. Her voice was soft, but carried an iron certainty. "He tried to erase me." Sarah knelt beside her, tears streaming. "But you're here, Em. You survived. And now we have everything we need." Linda leaned closer, wiping her eyes. "You don't fight this alone. We're with you every step." Dr. Lee pulled a chair beside her. "Emily, this won't just be an ethics case. This will go to the authorities, and whatever you choose, we will support you." Emily nodded slowly. For the first time since waking, she felt steady, not shaky, not uncertain, but grounded. The truth had been buried in darkness, but now it stood blazing before her. Daniel Carter had betrayed her, abandoned her, and tried to silence her forever. But she had risen, and now she would rise again, and this time, the world would hear her. The footage had shaken everyone in the room, but for Emily, it did something deeper. It rewired her resolve. She was no longer a victim waking from darkness. She was a woman rising with purpose, and purpose needed answers. Real answers. Answers that extended beyond the hospital and into the messy, hidden corners of Daniel's new life. 2 days after reviewing the videos, Sarah arrived with an iPad tucked under her arm and a look in her eyes that Emily recognized immediately, determination sharpened by anger. "Em," she said, pulling a chair beside her bed, "I think you need to see this." She opened a gallery of photos. Daniel in a luxury apartment, polished floors, glass walls. The Manhattan skyline sparkling like a promise behind him. Daniel at a rooftop lounge, arm brushing too close to a familiar figure. Daniel at a dinner table set with wine glasses and delicate candles. And in nearly every reflection, angle or shadow, Chloe. Emily stared at the screen, her pulse thudding painfully in her ears. "This apartment," she whispered. "This isn't ours." "No," Sarah said firmly. "This is in Brooklyn Heights. I checked the real estate listing. It's expensive, very expensive. And he moved into it right after you were transferred here." Emily's voice shook. "While I was dying?" Sarah's throat tightened. While you were fighting for your life, she corrected softly. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was settling into a new life. Emily's vision blurred not from tears alone, but from a betrayal that was now too large to hide behind excuses. Later that afternoon, Linda returned, anger simmering behind her calm exterior. She had spent the day gathering the rest of the medical files. "Emily," she said, "Daniel didn't just push the hospital to give up on you. He also made special requests for your discharge to a low-profile facility, requests that didn't match his supposed story of caring for you." Dr. Lee joined them, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He told administration he needed privacy because he was grieving. But in his insurance file, he listed a luxury address. He lied everywhere. Emily's fists clenched tightly around her blanket. So, he was living with her. With Chloe. Sarah nodded. Yes, and that's not all. She opened a folder on her tablet filled with screenshots, a trail of digital fingerprints that painted the truth in painful clarity. Emails from Daniel to Chloe. Restaurant reservations. Hotel stays, some in the exact same time frame Emily had been near death. And one message that made Emily's breath catch. "When the paperwork is done, we can finally start our real life." The timestamp was the night of the surgery. Silence pressed heavily around the room. Then suddenly, the door opened, and Chloe walked in. Startled gasps echoed as she stood there, wringing her hands. She looked nothing like the polished woman from the photos. Her mascara was smudged, her eyes red. She hesitated before speaking. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, I didn't know how bad it really was." Linda stiffened. "You shouldn't be here." But Emily lifted a trembling hand. "Let her speak." Chloe stepped closer, tears streaming. "Daniel told me your marriage was over. He told me you were unwell for years. He never said you were pregnant with triplets until it was too late. And he definitely didn't tell me he left you while you were dying." She swallowed hard. "When I found out you were awake, I checked his messages. I checked everything, and I saw the truth." She reached into her purse and handed Sarah a flash drive. "Those are the emails he sent me the night of your surgery. He said you were basically gone. He said the doctor confirmed nothing could be done. He told me he made the humane choice. But after seeing the footage, I know now that was a lie." Emily stared at her, the weight of betrayal deepening not just by Daniel, but by the story he spun so convincingly. Chloe wiped her cheeks. "I'm leaving him. And you should know, he's already trying to shift blame. To the doctors. To everyone but himself." Dr. Lee's jaw tightened. "He won't escape accountability." Emily sat taller, a strange calm settling over her. Her voice was soft but powerful. "He left me to die," she said. "Now he needs to face what he did." Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. "And he will, because at last, they had everything they needed: proof, witnesses, records, and now a confession from the woman he tried to build a second life with." Daniel's secret world had been exposed, and soon that world would collapse entirely. The truth was no longer a whisper hiding in the corners of Emily's mind. It was a storm-gathering force, waiting for the moment to break. And for the first time since waking from the coma, Emily felt in control of her story. She wasn't simply surviving anymore. She was preparing, planning, rising. The day after Chloe revealed Daniel's lies, a quiet urgency filled Emily's recovery room. Files covered the small bedside table: documents, screenshots, medical logs, camera timestamps. Sarah had turned the room into a command center, pacing with her tablet as though preparing for trial. Linda organized every piece of medical evidence, labeling folders with trembling hands. Dr. Lee reviewed the footage again and again, fury etched into the tight lines around his mouth. Emily sat among them, breathing deeply, absorbing everything. Her cheeks still pale, her body still fragile, but her eyes were alive now, focused, burning. "We can't keep this inside the hospital," Dr. Lee said firmly. "What Daniel did wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. He tampered with medical decisions. He forged a signature. He pushed for a premature declaration of brain death. Sarah crossed her arms. Then we take it to the hospital board. At minimum, Dr. Lee replied. But I think we need more than that. A public hearing forces transparency. They can't bury the truth if the entire board is there. Linda nodded. The board will call Daniel to attend. He won't expect that, not after everything he's tried to hide. Emily swallowed hard. Do we have enough? Sarah knelt beside her. We have proof he tried to get doctors to stop fighting for you. We have proof he was already living with Chloe. We have proof he lied to everyone. And now, we have Chloe's testimony. Emily looked at the flash drive sitting on the tray, holding the messages Daniel never thought anyone would read. Messages written while her heart struggled in the operating room. Messages celebrating freedom while she lay on life support. Her breath shook. Then let's do it. That simple sentence shifted the entire room. Linda squeezed her hand. We're with you. Dr. Lee nodded. I'll contact the hospital's ethics committee. Sarah straightened. And I'll contact the board's administrator. Daniel won't see this coming. Over the next hours, the team crafted their strategy. They reviewed every camera clip, every medical document, every inconsistency Daniel created. Dr. Lee coached Emily on how to describe her memories, not exaggerated, not emotional manipulation, but the truth, the coldness she felt in the OR, the loneliness, the sudden disappearance of Daniel's presence. Emily practiced speaking, her voice still raspy but steadying. I want them to hear me, she whispered. I want them to know he left. You'll get your chance, Sarah said, touching her shoulder gently. As the sun dipped outside the window, a quiet knock sounded on the door. Officer Grant stepped in with a small envelope. This just came from administration, he said. The board has agreed to schedule a hearing. They reviewed the camera evidence. They consider it urgent. Emily drew a slow breath. When? Tomorrow morning, Grant replied. Park Avenue office tower. Linda exhaled shakily. That's fast. It should be, Sarah said. This isn't a small violation. He nearly cost Emily her life. Later that night, Emily practiced sitting upright without assistance. Her muscles ached, but she refused to stop. Each breath was a declaration. Each movement was a reclaiming of strength. She wasn't going into that hearing as a victim. She was going as a survivor. Before bed, she whispered to herself. He thought I wouldn't wake up. Then her voice hardened. But I did. The storm was ready, and tomorrow Daniel would stand in the eye of it. The next morning arrived with a biting chill, the kind that seemed to sweep straight through Manhattan's towering buildings and settle into the bones of anyone brave enough to step outside. Emily, wrapped in a soft hospital shawl, sat in her wheelchair as an orderly helped her into a private transport van arranged by Dr. Lee. Sarah rode beside her, holding her sister's hand with a trembling determination. The van moved through the bustling streets, passing yellow cabs and honking traffic, the city alive and indifferent, yet Emily felt every mile leading her toward the moment her truth would be heard. The Park Avenue office tower loomed ahead, all steel and mirrored glass, a place where corporate empires made decisions no one dared to question. Today, however, it would host something far more human and far more damning. The hospital board had chosen this location for privacy, never expecting a case like Emily's to unfold beneath their polished ceilings. Inside the lobby, the marble floors gleamed under bright lights. Executives and doctors filled the elevator, murmuring anxiously. When Emily entered, the conversation stopped. Eyes shifted toward her pale, recovering, fragile, yet unmistakably powerful. She met their stares with quiet resolve. On the 11th floor, the boardroom doors opened to reveal a long glass table, sunlight pouring in from floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking Park Avenue. The city sprawled beneath them, as if all of Manhattan was watching. Emily's team entered first. Sarah, Linda, Dr. Lee, Officer Grant, and Chloe looking nervous yet determined, her eyes swollen from a night of tears. They positioned themselves beside Emily, forming a protective wall. Moments later, Daniel walked in. He wore a navy suit, expensive and sharp, a Mont Blanc pen clipped neatly to his pocket. His confidence radiated in every step. He expected a conversation, not an ambush. He nodded to the board members politely before his eyes landed on Emily. For the first time, his confidence cracked. "Emily, you're here," he said, trying to mask his shock with surprise and concern. Emily didn't answer. The chairwoman of the board, Dr. Marianne Colton, cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter, we've asked you here to discuss serious concerns regarding the decisions made on the night of your wife's surgery." Daniel forced a smile. "Of course, I'll answer anything. I was doing what I believed was best for her." Dr. Lee stepped forward. "Let's see if that's true." Officer Grant pressed play on the screen. The footage lit up the room, Daniel pressuring Dr. Patel, insisting the situation was hopeless, sliding the falsified document forward. The audio played next. "I need this decision made tonight." Daniel froze. His jaw tightened, eyes flickering as though searching for an escape, but the room offered none. Another clip played Daniel staring through the ICU glass, whispering, "She's not coming back. We're free now." A low gasp spread across the boardroom. Daniel raised a hand defensively. "This is out of context. I was devastated." Chloe stepped forward, voice shaking. "No, you told me she was practically dead. You said the hospital confirmed everything. You lied to me. You lied to all of us." He glared at her. "You don't know what you're talking about." Officer Grant placed a printed timestamp on the table. "Everything matches. The messages, the footage, the signature that does not match your wife's handwriting." Dr. Colton leaned forward, voice cold as steel. "Mr. Carter, you attempted to influence medical decisions, falsify a legal document, and expedite end-of-life approval for a patient who was not beyond recovery." Emily lifted her chin, her voice soft but unwavering. "You left me. You walked away while I was fighting for our children and for my life." Daniel's face drained of color. "Emily, no, She cut him off. "You didn't think I'd wake up, but I did." Silence filled the room, heavy, shaking, undeniable. Dr. Colton folded her hands. "Mr. Carter, you will be removed from all decision-making privileges regarding this patient. This case will be referred to legal authorities immediately." Daniel's breath caught. "What? This is insane." "No," Sarah said, stepping forward. "What you did was," and for the first time, Daniel realized the truth. His lies had finally met the light. His control was gone, and Emily had taken back her story. The confrontation on Park Avenue ended with Daniel storming out of the boardroom, his face drained of color, his arrogance shattered into splinters. But Emily knew the consequences hadn't truly begun, not yet. His downfall would come slowly, painfully, piece by piece, the same way he had dismantled her life. And she would witness every moment of it with a strength he never believed she possessed. In the days following the hearing, the hospital filed an official report with state authorities. Daniel was summoned for questioning regarding medical fraud, attempted manipulation of end-of-life decisions, and falsification of legal paperwork. The news didn't take long to spread. His company on Park Avenue reacted swiftly: emergency meeting, internal review, and then a cold, emotionless email that ended his employment. "Effective immediately, your access has been revoked. Security will escort you to clear your desk." He never saw it coming. Daniel arrived at the office that morning wearing the same confidence he wore into the boardroom. But security met him at the lobby. When he attempted to protest, they simply stated, "We have instructions, sir." The walk through the quiet hallway toward his office felt longer than any walk he'd taken in his life. His co-workers stared from behind glass partitions, whispers trailing him like shadows. He tried to keep his head high, but humiliation clung to him, pulling him down with every step. He threw his personal items into a box, his Mont Blanc pen, framed certificates, a Rolex Emily had gifted him long before betrayal poisoned their home. For the first time, those luxury symbols looked meaningless, hollow, like him. Meanwhile, Chloe packed her things quietly in the Brooklyn Heights apartment. She couldn't stand the guilt of knowing she'd been part of the story, even unknowingly. When Daniel came home early, she flinched. "You're still here?" he demanded, trying to regain the authority he'd always used to manipulate her. Chloe tightened her grip on her suitcase. "I'm leaving, Daniel." "You can't just walk away," he snapped. "Yes," she said, trembling but firm. "I can, and I will. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. You almost let your wife die. I won't be part of that." He grabbed her arm, but she pulled away with surprising strength. "We could have had a life together," he growled. "No," she whispered. "You never wanted a life. You wanted an escape, even from me." And then she was gone. Daniel stood in the empty apartment, breath unsteady, panic rising like a tide. His world was collapsing: career, mistress, reputation. He picked up his phone, scrolling desperately through contacts. No one answered. No one wanted to be associated with the scandal. While Daniel spiraled, Emily quietly rebuilt her strength. She practiced walking with a physical therapist, each step steady and deliberate. She held her babies for the first time without assistance, 3 tiny miracles who gazed up at her with eyes full of possibility. Sarah cried each time she witnessed those moments. "You made it back, Em," she whispered. "You made it back to them." But Daniel didn't show up once. He didn't ask for the babies. He didn't ask for Emily. Instead, he received a notice from the district attorney's office outlining the charges under review. The words medical fraud, forgery, and intent to mislead treatment decisions blurred together as he read. His hands shook, breath shallow. He threw the papers across the room, screaming into the empty walls that no longer protected him. A week later, he received divorce papers. Emily didn't include a dramatic note. No accusations. No anger. Just a simple line: "You left me to die. I won't let you near my children." That sentence broke Daniel in a way nothing else had. He sank onto the floor, pressing his forehead into his hands, realizing the truth in a wave of crushing clarity. He had not only lost Emily, he had lost the life he believed he deserved. He had lost everything he betrayed her for. And the worst part? The world wasn't done taking from him, because this was only the beginning of his fall. The months following Daniel's collapse felt like stepping into a different lifetime, one where Emily could finally breathe without fear, without darkness, without the weight of betrayal pressing against her chest. Her recovery wasn't instant, but each day she grew stronger. The doctors weaned her off machines, then off medications. Soon she could stand again, walk again, and finally hold all 3 of her babies in her arms at once, something she'd dreamed of long before the night everything nearly slipped away. Her children thrived, their tiny fingers wrapped around hers with fierce trust, their little cries soft but strong. She whispered promises to them during each feeding, each lullaby, each quiet moment in the rocking chair of the recovery ward. "Mommy's here," she'd murmur. "I'll never leave you." And this time, she meant it with a power born from survival. With the help of a hospital advocate and the evidence collected by her small but loyal circle, Emily pursued her divorce and custody battle confidently. Sarah stood beside her at every hearing. Linda testified bravely about that night in the OR. Officer Grant provided the security footage. Chloe submitted her emails and messages. Dr. Lee laid out the medical facts with unflinching clarity. The judge didn't hesitate. Emily was granted full, permanent custody. Daniel was allowed supervised visitation only pending criminal investigation outcomes. When Emily stepped out of the courthouse holding her babies, wind brushing through her hair, the world felt lighter, cleaner, possible. But life didn't just give her justice, it gave her something she never expected again: love. It began slowly, almost shyly. Dr. Nathan Blake, the pediatric specialist who cared for her triplets, visited her often during her rehab. At first, it was just medical updates, then small conversations, then gentle encouragements. Nathan wasn't flashy like Daniel. He wasn't ambitious to the point of cruelty. He was steady, warm, grounded, the kind of man who knew how to hold tiny infants with tenderness and how to speak with a kindness that made Emily feel seen again. He admired her strength, long before she realized she had any. One morning, as he checked one of the babies, he smiled softly and said, "They're fighters, just like their mom." Emily felt her heart tremble, not in fear, but in healing. Months later, when she was finally discharged, Nathan helped her carry the baby's belongings to a new home, a beautiful suburban house with a large yard, sunlight pouring through wide windows, the exact kind of place she once thought she'd never afford. The settlement from the hospital's negligence case gave her financial stability, and Nathan's growing presence in her life gave her emotional peace. The first dinner they shared in her new kitchen was simple takeout and baby bottles warming on the counter, but Emily felt more whole than she had in years. Meanwhile, Daniel's descent only deepened. Without a job, without reputation, without Chloe, he moved into a cramped, aging rental on the outskirts of Queens. His savings drained quickly from legal fees. His health deteriorated, stress gave way to illness, then to a diagnosis that left him shaken and alone. Chloe never returned. His former colleagues avoided him. His phone stayed silent. The man who chased luxury now lived in stark isolation, haunted by the life he destroyed with his own ambition. He watched Emily's life from afar, not in person, but through occasional court updates or photos sent by the state when required. He saw her smiling again, her babies healthy, her new home bright with possibility. Worst of all, he saw another man, Nathan, gently holding one of the triplets. Daniel realized something that hollowed him out completely. Emily didn't just survive. She rose. She found happiness without him. She found love again. She built a life he could never touch. One spring afternoon, Emily watched her children toddle across her backyard, while Nathan grilled on the patio. Sarah and Linda arrived carrying a picnic basket. Laughter filled the air, warm and real. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sunlight wash over her, letting the healing settle into her bones. She had been broken. She had been betrayed. She had been left to die. But she lived, and in that survival, she found justice, peace, love, and a life richer than anything Daniel ever chased. She whispered softly to herself, "I made it back." And she did not just to life, but to a future she finally deserved. And that's it. Our story has come full circle. And if you are still here, listening until this very moment, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it reminded you of the moments life tried to break you, and you rose anyway. Emily's story is more than drama. It's a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness gets, the human spirit can rise again. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Sometimes the pain we face becomes the very path that leads us to a better, more honest version of ourselves. And just like Emily, we learn that betrayal doesn't define us, loss doesn't end us, and love, real love, finds us again when we are ready. So take a breath. Let this be your reminder that healing is possible, justice is real, and new beginnings often grow from the ashes of what we thought would destroy us. If this story moved you even a little, give it a like, share it with someone who may need strength today, and don't forget to subscribe so we can continue walking through these powerful stories together. You matter, your healing matters, and your story isn't over yet.